The events of September 11th, 2001, unfolded as a grim chapter in modern history, marking a day that would forever alter the course of the United States and the world. On a clear and seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning, America was blindsided by an unprecedented act of terror. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. The impact created a fiery explosion, instantly killing everyone on board and trapping hundreds inside the building. The initial confusion gave way to horror as people realized that this was not an accident. Just 17 minutes later, at 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 struck the South Tower, confirming the country was under attack. The sight of two iconic skyscrapers burning against the Manhattan skyline was surreal and devastating. Millions watched in shock as television networks broadcast live footage, capturing the enormity of the tragedy. In Washington, D.C., at 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, the heart of the U.S. military. Flames and smoke billowed from the western side of the building, signaling another calculated strike. The attack on the Pentagon demonstrated the scale of the operation and the vulnerability of even the most secure institutions. Meanwhile, United Airlines Flight 93 was headed for another target, believed to be the White House or the U.S. Capitol. On board, passengers became aware of the earlier attacks through phone calls with their families. In an extraordinary act of courage, they decided to confront the hijackers. Their struggle in the cockpit caused the plane to crash in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, at 10:03 a.m., thwarting further destruction but costing all on board their lives. Their bravery symbolized the first line of resistance in a day marked by chaos and terror. Back in New York, the situation worsened. At 9:59 a.m., less than an hour after being struck, the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed. The scene was apocalyptic as a massive cloud of dust and debris engulfed Lower Manhattan. First responders, who had rushed into the buildings to save lives, now faced a catastrophic collapse, with many losing their own lives. The North Tower followed at 10:28 a.m., leaving behind a void in the city's skyline and claiming thousands of lives. The destruction of the Twin Towers was more than a physical loss. It was a symbol of vulnerability and grief that resonated across the globe. Amid the unfolding tragedy, New York City became a scene of extraordinary bravery and resilience. Firefighters, police officers, and emergency medical personnel worked tirelessly, pulling survivors from the rubble and guiding thousands to safety. The stairwells of the towers became corridors of hope and desperation as people helped one another escape, while others, tragically, were unable to make it out in time. Stories of heroism emerged, including that of Port Authority officer Will Jimeno and his sergeant, John McLaughlin, who were buried in the rubble but ultimately rescued after hours of painstaking efforts. The immediate aftermath of the attacks revealed the sheer scale of destruction and loss. Nearly 3,000 people were killed, including passengers on the planes, workers in the buildings, first responders, and bystanders. The toll included citizens from over 90 countries, reflecting the global reach of the tragedy. Hospitals in New York were overwhelmed with the injured, many suffering from severe burns, trauma, and respiratory issues caused by inhaling toxic dust. Families searched desperately for their loved ones, posting photographs and descriptions on walls and fences, hoping for a miracle. As the day unfolded, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, took the unprecedented step of grounding all civilian aircraft in U.S. airspace, creating an eerie silence over the skies. For the first time in history, the nation's air traffic was brought to a standstill. Security measures were heightened across the country as officials feared further attacks. Major landmarks, government buildings, and public spaces were evacuated, leaving cities in a state of lockdown. President George W. Bush, who was visiting an elementary school in Florida when the attacks began, addressed the nation that evening. He spoke of the immense loss and the resilience of the American people, vowing that those responsible would be brought to justice. The attacks were quickly attributed to Al-Qaeda, a terrorist organization led by Osama bin Laden, whose goal was to instill fear and destabilize the Western world. The coordinated strikes on September 11th were a culmination of years of planning, exploiting vulnerabilities in aviation security and aiming to make a profound political statement. The ripple effects of 9/11 extended far beyond the immediate loss of life and destruction. It was a day that tested the limits of human endurance, compassion, and courage. For survivors, families of victims, and first responders, the scars, both physical and emotional, would last a lifetime. Ground Zero, the site of the World Trade Center's collapse, became a somber reminder of the lives lost and the resilience of a city determined to rebuild. In the hours and days that followed, the nation came together in solidarity. Vigils were held across the country as people lit candles, prayed, and sang hymns in memory of the victims. American flags were displayed on homes, buildings, and cars, symbolizing unity and defiance in the face of terror. Acts of kindness and generosity abounded, from blood donations to volunteers offering support to those in need. The spirit of community and collective grief transcended divisions, showing the strength of human connection in times of crisis. The events of September 11, 2001, were more than an attack on the United States. They were an assault on the principles of freedom and democracy. The day left an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of those who lived through it and reshaped the global landscape. It was a day of unimaginable loss, but also one of resilience, bravery, and hope, as the world united in its determination to confront the forces of terror and darkness. The aftermath of September 11, 2001, was marked by a profound sense of loss and grief as the scale of the tragedy became fully evident. Nearly 3,000 lives were lost in a single day, including individuals from more than 90 countries. Each person represented a unique story, a life filled with aspirations, relationships, and dreams, abruptly cut short by acts of terror. Families across the United States and around the globe mourned loved ones who would never return home. The emotional weight of this loss resonated deeply, not just in those directly affected, but in the collective consciousness of the nation and the world. Vigils were held in towns and cities, flags flew at half-staff, and moments of silence were observed to honor the fallen. The devastation at Ground Zero in New York City is staggering. The Twin Towers, once symbols of economic strength and architectural ambition, were reduced to smoldering rubble. The pile of twisted steel and concrete became both a graveyard and a site of extraordinary heroism as search and rescue teams worked tirelessly, often at great personal risk. Firefighters, police officers, medical workers, and volunteers dug through the debris, hoping against all odds to find survivors. Their dedication exemplified the resilience and bravery of a city that refused to be defeated, even in the face of overwhelming destruction. The air around Ground Zero was thick with dust, a toxic mix of pulverized building materials, chemicals, and other hazardous substances. For first responders and cleanup crews, the conditions were perilous. Many worked without proper protective equipment, driven by the urgent need to recover remains and clear the site. Their health would later suffer, with thousands experiencing respiratory problems, cancers, and other chronic illnesses linked to their exposure. The sacrifices made by these individuals were monumental, both during the immediate crisis and in the years that followed. Beyond Ground Zero, the Pentagon bore its own scars. The western side of the building was heavily damaged by the impact of American Airlines Flight 77, with fires consuming parts of the structure. Military personnel, accustomed to the discipline and order of their environment, found themselves scrambling to rescue colleagues, extinguish flames, and secure the area. The attack on the Pentagon was a stark reminder of the vulnerability of even the most fortified institutions, shaking the confidence of a nation accustomed to its position of strength and security. In rural Pennsylvania, the crash site of United Airlines Flight 93 became a symbol of sacrifice and bravery. The passengers and crew of Flight 93, upon learning of the earlier attacks, made a fateful decision to confront their hijackers. They understood the likely outcome of their actions, but chose to act nonetheless, saving countless lives on the ground. The impact crater in a field near Shanksville was a quiet yet profound reminder of their courage, a testament to the human capacity for selflessness even in the face of mortal danger. In the days and weeks following the attacks, the United States grappled with the emotional and logistical challenges of recovery. Families sought closure by searching for loved ones, often clinging to hope despite the grim reality. Makeshift memorials sprang up across New York City, adorned with flowers, photographs, and messages of love and remembrance. Strangers comforted one another, united in their grief and determination to heal. The nation paused to reflect, with churches, synagogues, mosques, and other places of worship filled with people seeking solace and strength. On a broader scale, the country faced the daunting task of rebuilding. The economic impact of the attacks was significant, particularly in New York City, where businesses were disrupted, jobs were lost, and financial markets were shaken. The cleanup at Ground Zero alone took months, requiring careful and respectful handling of debris to recover remains and personal effects. As the site was cleared, discussions began about how to honor the victims and rebuild in a way that reflected resilience and hope. The national response extended beyond the physical recovery of affected sites. September 11th prompted a re-evaluation of security measures, particularly in the aviation sector. Airports implemented stricter protocols, including more thorough passenger screenings and the installation of advanced technology to detect threats. The creation of the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, in November 2001 marked a significant shift in how the U.S. approached travel safety, with measures designed to prevent future hijackings and attacks. The government also moved swiftly to address the larger implications of the attacks. President George W. Bush declared a war on terror, framing the fight against terrorism as a global struggle. This declaration shaped U.S. foreign and domestic policy for years to come. The Patriot Act, signed into law in October 2001, expanded surveillance and intelligence gathering capabilities, sparking debates about the balance between security and civil liberties. While the measures were intended to protect the nation, they also raised concerns about privacy and government overreach. Internationally, the United States sought to build coalitions to combat terrorism. In the weeks following 9/11, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first time in its history, declaring that an attack on one member was an attack on all. This unprecedented move underscored the global solidarity with the U.S., as nations pledged support for efforts to dismantle terrorist networks. The focus soon turned to Afghanistan, where al-Qaeda had found a safe haven under the Taliban regime. In October 2001, the U.S. launched Operation Enduring Freedom, beginning a protracted conflict aimed at dismantling al-Qaeda and removing the Taliban from power. The cultural impact of September 11th was equally profound. The attacks reshaped how Americans viewed themselves and the world. Patriotism surged as citizens rallied around shared values and the desire to rebuild. Symbols like the American flag took on renewed significance, displayed prominently in homes, businesses, and public spaces. The phrase "never forget" became a rallying cry, a commitment to honor the victims and the lessons of that day. Art, literature, and media also reflected the collective grief and resilience of the nation. Films, books, and documentaries explored the human stories behind the attacks, from the heroism of first responders to the experiences of survivors and families. The events of 9/11 became a touchstone for understanding loss, courage, and the enduring impact of trauma. Memorials, both temporary and permanent, served as spaces for reflection and remembrance. The 9/11 Memorial and Museum in New York City, which opened years later, became a poignant tribute to those who perished and a testament to the resilience of a city and nation. For many, the emotional toll of 9/11 lingered long after the initial shock. Survivors, families of victims, and first responders faced ongoing challenges, including physical health issues, psychological trauma, and the complexities of rebuilding their lives. Support networks and organizations emerged to provide assistance, from counseling services to financial aid for those affected. The nation's collective grief found expression in these acts of care and solidarity, as people came together to help one another heal. Globally, the attacks underscored the interconnectedness of nations and the need for collective action against terrorism. While the immediate focus was on al-Qaeda and its affiliates, the broader implications of 9/11 prompted discussions about addressing the root causes of extremism, from economic inequality to political instability. The events of that day highlighted the vulnerabilities of an increasingly interconnected world, emphasizing the importance of international cooperation in promoting peace and security. As the United States and the world reflected on the events of September 11th, 2001, the emphasis shifted from mourning to rebuilding. The resilience of individuals, communities, and institutions became a source of inspiration, demonstrating the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. From the ashes of destruction rose a renewed commitment to protect and uphold the values of freedom, democracy, and unity. While the scars of that day remain, they serve as a reminder of the courage, compassion, and determination that define us. Even in the darkest of times, the events of September 11th, 2001, forever altered the trajectory of global security, geopolitics, and the way nations perceived and addressed the threat of terrorism. The immediate aftermath saw a surge in policy responses and military actions aimed at safeguarding nations and dismantling terrorist networks. The United States, in particular, became the epicenter of a dramatic shift in priorities, dedicating significant resources to preventing future attacks. These changes had a cascading effect on domestic policies, international alliances, and global conflict zones, redefining the nature of warfare and diplomacy in the 21st century. One of the most significant responses to 9/11 was the initiation of the global war on terror. This overarching strategy aimed to eliminate terrorist threats worldwide, with a primary focus on al-Qaeda and similar organizations. The campaign began with Operation Enduring Freedom, launched in October 2001, targeting Afghanistan, where al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden and his network operated under the protection of the Taliban regime. The US-led coalition swiftly dismantled the Taliban government, but the conflict in Afghanistan proved to be far from over. The war evolved into a prolonged effort to stabilize the country, combat insurgency, and build democratic institutions, with varying degrees of success and criticism. The invasion of Iraq in 2003 marked another critical chapter in the post-9/11 geopolitical landscape. While the stated objective was to eliminate Saddam Hussein's alleged weapons of mass destruction and his supposed ties to terrorism, the decision to invade was met with significant controversy. The war in Iraq, though not directly linked to the events of 9/11, became a defining element of the broader war on terror. It reshaped the Middle East, leading to regime change, but also creating a power vacuum that contributed to regional instability and the rise of extremist groups like ISIS. The consequences of these interventions continue to reverberate across the region, influencing the geopolitical dynamics of today. Domestically, the attacks led to sweeping changes in security policies and the expansion of government powers in the name of national security. The establishment of the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, in 2002 consolidated various agencies to coordinate efforts to prevent and respond to terrorist threats. This reorganization represented one of the most significant changes to the U.S. government since World War II. The Transportation Security Administration, TSA, was created under DHS, implementing rigorous screening processes at airports to prevent hijackings and other attacks. These measures, while widely accepted as necessary, also sparked debates about privacy and civil liberties. The USA Patriot Act, passed in October 2001, expanded the government's surveillance and investigative powers. While it was designed to detect and deter terrorist activity, the act raised concerns about the erosion of individual freedoms and potential misuse of power. Critics argued that the broad language of the law allowed for overreach, impacting not only those suspected of terrorism, but also ordinary citizens. The act became a focal point for discussions about the balance between security and personal liberties in a post-9/11 world. The global community also witnessed a transformation in how nations approached counterterrorism. Intelligence sharing and international cooperation became paramount, with organizations like NATO playing a key role in coordinating efforts. NATO's invocation of Article 5, declaring the 9/11 attacks as an attack on all member states, underscored the importance of collective defense. This unprecedented move demonstrated solidarity with the United States and set the stage for joint military actions in Afghanistan. Multinational coalitions became a cornerstone of counterterrorism strategies, emphasizing the interconnected nature of modern security challenges. At the same time, the focus on counterterrorism led to shifts in military doctrine and the nature of warfare. Traditional state-on-state conflicts gave way to asymmetric warfare, where smaller, non-state actors posed significant threats to powerful nations. The rise of insurgencies and decentralized terrorist networks necessitated new approaches to combat and intelligence. Special operations forces, drone strikes, and cyber capabilities became increasingly prominent in addressing these unconventional threats. These changes highlighted the evolving nature of conflict in the 21st century, where technology and adaptability often outweighed sheer military might. The financial and economic impact of 9/11 and its aftermath was also profound. The immediate damage to the U.S. economy included disruptions to financial markets, the aviation industry, and tourism. The costs of rebuilding and recovery were significant, particularly in New York City. The longer-term economic implications included the staggering expenses of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, which amounted to trillions of dollars. These expenditures sparked debates about the allocation of resources and the opportunity costs of prolonged military engagements. The societal impact of 9/11 and the subsequent war on terror extended beyond policy and economics. The attacks profoundly shaped public perceptions of security, immigration, and identity. Anti-Muslim sentiment and Islamophobia surged in many parts of the world, fueled by misconceptions and fears about terrorism. This backlash led to discrimination, hate crimes, and increased scrutiny of Muslim communities, creating social divisions and challenges for integration and understanding. Advocacy groups and individuals worked tirelessly to counter these narratives, emphasizing the importance of tolerance and unity in the face of adversity. Cultural expressions also reflected the impact of 9/11 and the ensuing years of conflict. Films, literature, and art explored themes of loss, resilience, and the complexities of war. Works like The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30 delved into the experiences of soldiers and intelligence operatives, while novels like Khaled Hosseini's The Kite Runner offered perspectives on the human cost of conflict in Afghanistan. These cultural artifacts provided a means of processing collective trauma and understanding the broader implications of a changed world. Memorials and remembrance became central to honoring the victims and reflecting on the lessons of 9/11. The National September 11th Memorial and Museum in New York City serves as a poignant tribute to those who lost their lives, as well as a space for education and reflection. Similar memorials in Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, and around the world commemorate the lives lost and the bravery displayed on that fateful day. These sites serve as reminders of the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of vigilance in preserving peace and security. The legacy of 9/11 and the global response to terrorism continues to shape the world today. The lessons learned from the past 2 decades underscore the complexity of addressing modern security challenges. While significant progress has been made in dismantling terrorist networks and enhancing security, the root causes of extremism, such as political instability, economic disparity, and ideological radicalization, remain pressing concerns. Efforts to address these underlying issues require a multifaceted approach, combining military, diplomatic, and humanitarian strategies. The post-9/11 era also highlighted the importance of resilience and adaptability in the face of unforeseen challenges. From the heroes who responded to the attacks to the policymakers and citizens who navigated the complexities of a changed world, the responses to 9/11 demonstrate the capacity for growth and unity in times of crisis. The ongoing pursuit of justice, security, and understanding remains a testament to the enduring impact of that pivotal moment in history. The legacy of September 11th, 2001, extends far beyond the immediate devastation and the policy changes it initiated. It reshaped the collective consciousness of a generation and continues to influence global geopolitics, security practices, and cultural narratives. The enduring impact of 9/11 is visible in the ways nations have adapted to new security threats, in the societal changes that have occurred as a result, and in the ongoing efforts to honor and learn from the past. One of the most profound aspects of the legacy of 9/11 is the global recalibration of security protocols and the continuous adaptation to evolving threats. In the years following the attacks, governments around the world introduced sweeping measures to detect and prevent terrorist activity. These efforts were not limited to the United States. Countries worldwide revised their intelligence sharing mechanisms, border security protocols, and counterterrorism strategies. International organizations such as the United Nations adopted resolutions aimed at combating terrorism financing and encouraging global cooperation against extremist threats. This collaborative spirit, while fostering unprecedented levels of international engagement, also brought challenges related to balancing national sovereignty with collective security needs. The ripple effects of the attacks also led to changes in how people travel and interact globally. Airports became the front line for many of these security enhancements, with extensive screening processes becoming the norm. The introduction of body scanners, strict baggage regulations, and heightened identity checks fundamentally altered the experience of air travel. While these measures provided an added layer of protection, they also brought frustrations and raised questions about the trade-offs between security and convenience. Over time, these adjustments became normalized, reflecting a broader societal acceptance of living in a world where vigilance against threats is a daily reality. Another key legacy of 9/11 lies in the cultural shifts that it prompted. The attacks and their aftermath gave rise to an extensive body of art, literature, and media exploring themes of loss, resilience, and the human cost of conflict. Writers, filmmakers, and artists sought to capture the emotional and social ramifications of 9/11, producing works that ranged from reflective memoirs to intense dramas. Films like United 93 and World Trade Center offered dramatized accounts of the day's events, while novels like Jonathan Safran Foer's Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close delved into the personal grief and collective memory associated with the tragedy. These cultural artifacts provided avenues for people to process the trauma and to engage in conversations about the broader implications of a changed world. The societal impact of 9/11 also included a heightened awareness of global interconnectedness and the complexities of identity in a multicultural world. The attacks highlighted the dangers of ideological extremism, but also revealed the risks of stereotyping and scapegoating. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, Muslim communities in the United States and around the world faced increased scrutiny and discrimination. Hate crimes against Muslims and those perceived to be of Middle Eastern descent surged, fueled by fear and misunderstanding. Advocacy groups and community leaders worked tirelessly to counter these negative narratives, emphasizing the values of unity, inclusion, and mutual respect. This period also saw a reevaluation of national and individual priorities, as people sought to find meaning in the midst of tragedy. The spirit of volunteerism and community engagement flourished, with countless individuals contributing to relief efforts, supporting affected families, or participating in initiatives to rebuild damaged areas. The phrase "never forget" became a rallying cry, underscoring the importance of remembering not only the lives lost, but also the lessons learned about resilience and compassion. One of the enduring challenges of the post-9/11 world has been addressing the long-term consequences of the wars and policies initiated in response to the attacks. The conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, while aimed at dismantling terrorist networks and promoting stability, also led to significant civilian casualties, displacement, and regional instability. Veterans returning from these wars faced physical and psychological challenges, highlighting the need for robust support systems and a deeper understanding of the human cost of military engagements. The experiences of these veterans and their families became an integral part of the 9/11 legacy, reminding society of the sacrifices made in the pursuit of security and justice. The financial cost of the post-9/11 era has also been substantial, with trillions of dollars spent on military operations, intelligence, and domestic security measures. These expenditures sparked debates about the allocation of resources and the long-term sustainability of such investments. Critics questioned whether some of the strategies employed were effective or whether they inadvertently contributed to the very instability they sought to prevent. Proponents argued that the absence of another large-scale attack on U.S. soil demonstrated the success of these efforts. This ongoing debate reflects the complexities of evaluating the impact of security measures in an ever-changing global landscape. The legacy of 9/11 also includes the stories of individual and collective heroism that emerged from the tragedy. The courage of first responders who risked their lives to save others, the resilience of survivors who rebuilt their lives in the face of immense loss, and the determination of ordinary citizens who turned their grief into action all serve as powerful reminders of the human capacity for strength and solidarity. These stories have inspired initiatives to promote community resilience and preparedness, ensuring that the lessons of 9/11 continue to guide future generations. Memorialization has played a central role in preserving the memory of 9/11 and its aftermath. The National September 11th Memorial and Museum in New York City stands as a testament to the lives lost and the bravery displayed on that day. The design of the memorial, with its reflecting pools and inscribed names, invites visitors to reflect on the scale of the tragedy while honoring the individuals who were affected. Similar memorials in Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, and other locations serve as spaces for reflection and education, ensuring that the events of 9/11 remain a part of the collective memory. Looking ahead, the legacy of 9/11 underscores the importance of vigilance, adaptability, and global cooperation in addressing emerging challenges. The evolving nature of threats, from cyber attacks to biosecurity risks, requires a multifaceted approach that combines technological innovation with human ingenuity. The lessons learned from 9/11 and its aftermath continue to inform strategies for building resilient societies capable of withstanding crises and fostering peace. At its core, the legacy of 9/11 is a reminder of the profound interconnectedness of the modern world. The events of that day demonstrated how actions in one part of the globe can reverberate across continents, shaping policies, perceptions, and lives. They also highlighted the enduring values of courage, compassion, and the pursuit of justice, which remain essential in navigating the complexities of a rapidly changing world. As we continue to reflect on the impact of 9/11, the challenge lies in balancing the need for security with the commitment to upholding the principles of freedom, equality, and humanity that define our shared aspirations.